Hello friends, today I've come up again with another historical chess game of the chess world. This game was called the game of the century, of course the last century. It was played between Donald Bryne and Bobby Fischer in 1956 at the third Rosenwald Trophy. Uh, Bobby Fischer was playing from the black, so let me flip the board as our focus will be from the black here. The Bryne started with knight to f3 and knight to f6, so that's Grunfeld defense, c4, and then g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, uh, d4, and castles for from Bobby Fischer. So here at this position, bishop to f4 was played, and d5 from Bobby Fischer, queen to b3, where d takes c4 and queen takes c4. So now the pressure is on the c7 pawn, so c6 from Bobby Fischer, and now e4. So the idea is Bryne is trying to push the pawn and trying to attack onto the knight at f6. So knight b to d7. So idea is if you pushed my pawn knight e5, say e5, and try to attack on the bishop on the knight, then knight to b6, attack onto the queen, queen may go to c5, and then a knight f to d5, and so trying to attack on the bishop. But even if you capture knight takes d5, knight takes d5 will again on the bishop, and you have to move the bishop. So that's why. Anyways, go back to the game. Here, rook to d1 was played, and then knight to b6. Attacking onto the queen. So queen moved to c5. Oops, sorry, c5, and then bishop to g4. So Bobby Fischer, although on the looks of it you'd like to exchange the bishop against the knight, and then if white captures it, the queen side will be cramped from the white, but you hardly see these kind of captures in the at this level. So anyways, bishop to g5 was played, and here Bobby Fischer come up with a novelty. He played knight to a4. So friends, pause the video here and try to figure it out. Can this knight be captured? So friends, let's first analyze what happens if white captures this knight. Say knight takes a4, then knight takes e4 would come, and so even if you capture queen takes e7, but then queen to a5 check. um, you can save this check by say playing b4, but then queen takes e4 a4, and of course you cannot capture this knight because rook to e1 will pin the queen. uh, on the contrary, if you try to capture with, say for example, if you try to play knight to c3, but then rook f to e8 first, and there will be attack onto the queen, and say if you move the queen, where can queen go? Say queen goes to a3, but then queen takes a3, b takes a3, and then you get your knight back. So knight takes c3, it will be a check even if you try to defend it with bishop to e3, but then knight takes the rook, and of course the black will be on the winning position from here onwards. So that is why from this position, black has did not capture the knight, and he played queen to a3 instead. But then it was because it was Bobby Fischer. He comes up knight to c3, and then bishop takes c3. So from the looks of here you may see, okay, white has a very strong center position here, but honestly I don't think so. Why? The next move comes in and knight takes e4. Although Bobby Fischer has allowed uh, bishop takes e5, which will fork the knight and fork the rook and the queen. But then queen move to b6, and let's see, can you capture this? So friends, again pause the video here and try to find out, can this rook be captured? Ready? So friends, first analyze what happens if bishop takes f8. So bishop takes f8, and there'll be attack onto the queen. So queen, here on this position, uh, white would very happily try to trade the queen. So queen to b3, but then knight to c3 first. So if white feels greedy and try to capture this knight, then but bishop to b4 would pin this queen, and then the queen is gone. um, on the other hand, if you try to trade, say for example here, sorry, so here you try to capture the queen, say queen takes b6, but then a takes b6, and if you try to, now there's an attack onto the on this pawn, and if you try to support the pawn, say rook to a1, but then bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and then bishop to g7, uh, and then attack onto this pawn. So but if even if king to d2 and bishop to d4, bishop takes d4, and again from this position it looks like black is complete command on this. White's king is in the center, and both the rooks are not connected, and all in all, it's a very comfortable position for the black. So uh, that is why Bryne had did not capture uh, the rook at f1. Instead, he played bishop to c4. Uh, but from here, from this position, Bobby Fischer again tried to come up with knight takes c3. So he's even given the sacrifice of this. So that's a pure knight sacrifice. Uh, Instead of capturing this knight, Bryne comes up with bishop to c5, and there is an attack onto this queen. But here, first rook f to e8, and that's a check. Uh, and there is no other way to move the king, so king goes to f1. But here again, Bobby Fischer comes up with another novelty. So he sacrificed his queen, and he played bishop to e6. So friends, now is a puzzle for you. uh, if you first of all, if you're enjoying this video, press the like button, and the puzzle is, what happens if you can you capture the queen here, can you accept the queen sacrifice? So let's first say what happens if so first analyze what happens if you do not capture do not accept the queen sacrifice, and you try to capture the knight instead. Say queen takes c3, but then queen takes c5. You cannot, if even if you capture the queen, and now you will lose the queen itself, right? But on a contrary, if you try to if you say, okay, I will capture the bishop at e6, so what happens then? So but then queen to b5 check, queen to g1, then knight to e2 check, queen to f1, then knight to g3, and that's double check, and you really do not have really have no place to go. But then king to g1, then queen to f1 check, rook to f1, and then knight to e2 checkmate. So that's called a smoother checkmate. You should learn this pattern, and try it in your own games. That's really helpful at times. So but let's go back to the game. After bishop to e6, Bryne accepted the queen sacrifice, and then he captured bishop takes e6. But then comes bishop to c4 check, bishop takes c4, and that's a check. uh, E file was completely guarded by the rook, so the only place you can go here is to king to g1. But then the windmill pattern started. For those who don't know what's a windmill pattern, here I'm going to show you. Knight to e2 check, and then uh, king to, again king to f1, but then knight takes d4, and again that's a check, and again the e file is blocked, so you really do not have any option to go. Then you go to king to g1, but then again knight to e2 check. You really have no option. Again you come back king to f1, but then knight to c3, again that's a check. You again have to move to king to g1, but then now you really now you do not have any other pieces to capture from this position. But here a takes b6, and now uh, you you can capture the rook first, but then a takes b6, you capture the bishop first, and now the attack onto the queen. The queen also cannot capture the knight because it's been guarded by the bishop. So friends, and this rook is going to be fall anyway. So if you analyze the entire situation, against the queen you get two minor pieces, one pawn and a rook. That's enough compensation against the queen, I would say. But here what options do white have? White move to queen to b4, but then of course if black tries to save the bishop, then white can save the rook. So that is why rook to a4 first, and now say what you play. Say you try to support the rook and try to play queen to d6, but then knight takes d1 first, and say you try to play queen to d7 and attack onto this rook first, but then rook a to a8, and then queen takes d1, where rook takes a2, and you need to save the back rank checkmate, because rook to a1 can come. So h3 is more or less forced, but rook to a1, and then the black will get the queen back again, queen again. So having said that, with after all those calculations, from this position, Bobby Fischer played, the Bryne played queen to takes b6, but then knight takes d1, h3, and then rook takes a2, king to h2. That's because you need to activate the rook. That's the rook was sleeping till now, but then uh, rook takes f2. Now rook to e1, and white has tried to exchange the rooks here. From this position, black is very happily to trade. So rook takes e1, and but queen to d8 check first, where bishop goes to bishop defended it, bishop to f8, and now knight takes e1. Now bishop to d5, and it's just formalities from here on, but trust me. Say for example, what would you play here? Say you try to play queen to b8, but then you can play knight to d3 and offering knight exchanges. That's not a sacrifice, by the way. Say for example, if you take knight takes d3, but then rook takes g2, king to h1, rook to d2 check, king to g1, and then rook takes d3. So but here on this position, Bryne played knight to f3, and he has tried to defend this pawn. But here knight to e4, and queen to b8. uh, Now attack, there's an attack on this pawn, so pawn to b5, uh, h4, h5, uh, knight to e5, and then king to g7 first, because you now need to bring this dark square bishop into the game, but then king to g1, so king goes back. But now here Bobby Fischer has activated his last minor piece, and then it comes bishop to c5 check. So friends, if you try to play king to h2, say for example, um, but then uh, knight to d2, and knight is going to, on f1, and there will be check from this position. So king to h1, say for example, but then rook a to a1, rook to a1 check, uh, king to h2, but then knight to f1 check, king goes to h3, say for example. You can go on to h1 as well, and we will analyze this in a minute. But then rook to a2, and basically there's a this pawn is going to be fall, but knight to f3 for example, but then from here bishop e6 check. The only place you have now is g4, and h takes g4 would be a checkmate. Even from this position you try to go to king to h1, but then again you will not be able to save the checkmate, because bishop to f2 first. Say you play knight to f3, but then knight to g3 check, and king to h2 only move, but then rook to h1 would be checkmate. So from this position, white has played king to f1, but even as I said, it's all formalities left from here onwards, and that's the way, that's how it is. Yes, true. Knight to g3 check, king to e1, but then bishop to b4 check, king to d1, bishop to b3 check, king to c1, then knight to e2 check, and then king to b1 only place, and then knight to c3 check. uh, of course, the only place left is again a king to c1, and now you try. Now there's again puzzle for you. Try how many ways you can checkmate this king from here. Bobby Fischer played rook to c2 check and mate, but if you have found out bishop to a3 check and mate, so congratulations, friends. That was a game. I tried to analyze to the extent I can. Um, Let me know how you find this video, find this game. Do give me in your comments, and subscribe to this channel for future historical games. Take care. Till then, bye bye.